For decades following the Second World War, Japan's geopolitical posture was strictly defensive. Bound by a pacifist constitution, Tokyo's standard response to regional aggression was delivering diplomatic notes of concern, avoiding any display of military force. But on a morning in April 2026, a Japanese destroyer steered directly into the Taiwan Strait. As this satellite view shows, the strait is a narrow channel of water separating Taiwan from the Chinese mainland. This maneuver occurred 48 hours after Russia's combat corvettes docked at a southern Chinese naval base. Moscow and Beijing were staging a 5-day military port visit, intended to project their combined strength across the Pacific. The Japanese destroyer JS Ikazuchi spent 14 hours cruising through the strait. The ship moved at a deliberate pace, keeping its guns leveled at the horizon inside waters that Beijing defines as its own sovereign inland lake. The Chinese People's Liberation Army scrambled its naval and air units, locked radars onto the destroyer, and broadcast constant warnings. Yet Beijing did not fire a single warning shot or attempt to physically alter the Japanese vessel's course. This 14-hour mission marks a departure from Tokyo's reliance on diplomatic protests, signaling a move toward using direct military presence to challenge the territorial claims of its neighbors. To understand why Tokyo took this risk, we have to look at the region's geography. This map shows a natural barrier known in military doctrine as the First Island Chain. It is a string of landmasses running from southern Japan through Okinawa and down to Taiwan. This geological alignment acts as a cage. The Chinese Navy is largely confined to the shallow seas along its own coast, restricted from the deep, open waters of the wider Pacific Ocean. To reach the open ocean, Chinese warships must navigate a handful of restrictive transit funnels. The Miyako Strait, positioned directly beneath the Japanese archipelago, is one of the narrowest and most heavily monitored of these routes. Beijing has spent years trying to circumvent this containment using gray zone tactics, actions that stay just below the threshold of open war. They regularly deploy maritime militias disguised as civilian fishing boats to swarm disputed territories like these rugged outcroppings of the Senkaku Islands. At the same time, Russia pressures Tokyo from the north. Moscow uses its military occupation of the Kuril Islands to run nuclear submarines right under Japan's nose, cycling warships around Hokkaido to stretch the Japanese military across two fronts. By simultaneously squeezing Japanese forces with nuclear submarines in the north and civilian swarms in the south, Beijing and Moscow aim to force Tokyo to abandon these choke points, securing a clear breakout route into the Pacific. Tokyo anticipated this two-front pressure and adjusted its defense budget to weaponize its island geography. In the air, Japan retrofitted its helicopter carriers, like the JS Izumo and Kaga. By adding heat-resistant flight decks, these ships operate as light aircraft carriers, capable of launching vertical takeoff F-35B stealth fighters directly over the ocean. On the surface, the Japanese Maritime Self-Defense Force fields dozens of modern destroyers. These vessels utilize the Aegis system, a radar and missile network, allowing a single ship to simultaneously track and strike hundreds of airborne targets. They also extended their offensive reach. By outfitting these destroyers with American-made Tomahawks and domestic Type 12 surface-to-ship missiles, Tokyo can strike enemy fleets over 1,000 kilometers away. Beneath the waves, Japan deploys ultra-quiet lithium-ion battery submarines. These diesel-electric boats lie in ambush exactly at those narrow geographic choke points, waiting to intercept vessels trying to slip past the island chain. By layering stealth fighters, deploying long-range missiles, and positioning silent submarines directly on top of its natural island bottlenecks, Japan has created a lethal barrier that effectively blocks any attempt to move into the deep Pacific. China's reliance on maritime militias and legally ambiguous offshore blockades loses its effectiveness against this hardware. Those gray zone tactics become difficult to maintain when confronted with heavy naval assets willing to hold their ground. That is why Tokyo sent a destroyer through the Taiwan Strait. It was a physical demonstration that Japan will use its military to control these critical choke points. For Beijing, this creates a strategic crisis. The vision of sending a dominant Chinese fleet into the deep Pacific is halted right at their coastline. In the past, Tokyo would have retreated to its safe harbors and issued a statement. Today, Japan answers nuclear posturing and territorial incursions by deploying heavy warships directly into contested waters. Japan has discarded its defensive shell. Rather than avoiding the territorial conflicts of East Asia, Tokyo has positioned its arsenal at the center of the turbulence, choosing to directly dictate the balance of power in the Pacific.